Okay, so we're recording now. So this is the Designing Your First Year, How to Find Meaningful Experiences for Spring and Summer. I'm Dean McDeval with co-host April McClellan, who is taking things sideways today because, well, why not? So as we're thinking about designing your first year, April, please take us through the introductions and goals for today.
Sure. So Dean Duvall and I are really excited about all of you guys being here. And there's things that we hope that you will get out of it. So we want to help you brainstorm meaningful possibilities. So things you can try this spring on campus or when you go home this summer. We want to help you expand your thoughts about the kinds of experiences that are worthwhile. Learn about how to talk to other people for ideas. Learn about search tools. So how can you find these experiences? We want to help you improve your resume bullet writing so that, if something comes up and someone asks for a resume, you can feel confident that you have something great to show them. And then we also want you to leave this session today feeling like you know what your next step is.
As we are going through the day, please put any questions in chat. We will get to those. If you don't hear back from us during the session, we will follow up afterwards. We want to start off with this talking a little bit more about meaningful experiences. And what makes a meaningful experience meaningful? Well, the answer is you. Now, I know this sounds cheesy, but here's the reality behind it. There are no inherently meaningful experiences out there. You're not going to go to a list and find a list of meaningful experiences and unmeaningful experiences. What you're going to find are just experiences that you can take advantage of. What's going to really make it meaningful is choosing something or even creating something that aligns with your own interests and values. The second thing is there needs to be some reflection on what it means to you. And really that during that reflection is when a lot of the meaning comes out. It's often in hindsight when you look back and say, oh, I see how this helped me learn more about myself or learn more about the world. So please keep that in mind as we are going through today. We're going to walk you through a series of exercises that are going to help you do this. To begin, what I would like you to do is go to this link. I'm hoping people are at a laptop or some other way that they can follow along while they also are working on this worksheet. When you go to that tinyurl.com/designmyexperience, what you'll find is a copy of a worksheet that looks something like this. Now, this worksheet is going to ask you to do 3 different steps. And while we're showing you this, I do want you to notice at the very back, very end, there's this parking lot. This is a parking lot where if you have any questions or ideas that just aren't fitting in anywhere else, or you just want to mess around, go ahead and park it in there. Going back up to the top then, step 1, you always need to start thinking about, well, who am I? What really matters to you? So with so many possible spring and summer experiences to try, think about what gives you a sense of purpose and joy. Write as many as you'd like. Try to write at least 3. For those of you who were in the arts and sciences, you may remember way back in August when you were doing orientation bare beginnings, there was a workshop that April and I were involved in. You may have seen us doing our thing back then. So we asked you to think about your values. So if you weren't there at the session, or frankly, it's just hard to remember that far back right now, so much has changed, just think about what are your values? What really matters most to you? And write them in 1, 2, and 3. When you get to the link at the tinyurl.com, click on download so you can download the document and be able to edit it. If that fails, technological failures have been known to happen. You can always just write this down on a piece of paper. The second thing to consider is what brings me joy. To help you brainstorm, think about experiences in the past that brought you joy and ask yourself, what were you doing at the time? Who were you doing it with? What and where and when were you doing it? As we're doing all this, I want to highlight this dysfunctional belief and a reframe that is important. There's a dysfunctional belief that you're supposed to plan your life by figuring out the best possible life, making a plan, and then doing it. That's not actually how it works. There are multiple great lives that any of us can choose. There are multiple great lives within me, and I get to choose which one I want to try next. So think about it that way. We're going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes, brainstorm, and again, put in chat, especially if we're referring to something and the link doesn't work, we're not sharing what we're talking about, and so it's confusing, please let us know. Take a few minutes to do that, please.
While you guys are working on that, can I ask a question? Is it more distracting for me to be sideways, or would you rather have me have my camera on with it looking wacky like this, or is it better for me to just turn it off? If anybody has an opinion on that, I'd appreciate it. I really don't know how to fix it. I've been trying here.
Let's use the reactions at the bottom right-hand side to give a thumbs up if you just want to leave April sideways.
Okay. The people have spoken. I'm here and I'm sideways, and I'm going to just be proud of it.
Awesome.
Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Looks like we've run up about 3 minutes. Can I get a thumbs up if you're done at this point? Okay, seeing a couple. Let's give it another minute. Okay, that's another minute. Can I see another show of thumbs? All right, just another 30 seconds or so, just to let others finish. And if you don't finish it to your heart's content while we're doing the program, you can definitely continue thinking about it afterwards. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and continue. The next step after thinking about what's most meaningful to you is to think about what kind of experiences are out there. I should begin by pointing out that at the very end of this program, we are going to share with you a worksheet with an incredible amount of information about different resources on campus, opportunities you could follow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't want to overwhelm you with it in the middle of the workshop. So we're just going to give you a 30,000-foot view of the different types of experiences that you can get involved with over the spring and next summer. Please know, please, this will be the carrot to hang in there with us throughout the whole thing. At the very end, we will provide that document for you with all of the great resources. So in the spring, what can you do? Some of the most common things that we will see students doing in the spring to get involved, of course, are the clubs, the student activities that you can get involved in. And there's going to be an activities fair in January. Your WUSAs and RAs are fantastic for giving you ideas about things to get involved in. Community service through Campus Y is a very popular thing. Lots of different options. You can do part-time work. So think about that for the spring. For the summer, certainly community service is very common. Also, learning a new skill or working on a passion project can be pretty common too. Part-time seasonal jobs, continuing something that you did in the past is often something you can do after your first year. And we're talking about experiences here. Certain students also do coursework during the summer if they have the resources and the interest to do that. But we're just focusing on experiences rather than classes, which is why you don't see them up here. But part-time seasonal jobs, learning about careers through informational interviews and shadowing. Less common, but certainly out there for first years to do after their first year. Undergraduate research, study abroad, and internships. April, do you want to say a little bit more about any of these kinds of experiences up here?
Yeah, I think, I am willing to bet that a lot of you have heard, gosh, it's so important to do internships, so important to do this. And I really do think that's true. I think you learn so much about yourself. You learn so much about the world. You learn kind of what you like and what you don't like. But that doesn't only have to happen in internships. So I think one thing that we wanted to do by showing this breadth of experience is that doing a part-time job in the summer that maybe if you feel like you want to have a new experience and something different than a part-time job you've had in the past, you could go for think about ways to go for exposure to maybe a different industry than you've seen before, or if you want to stay at a same place that you've been in the past, maybe you can ask to be involved in a different kind of a role. So let's say that you're sort of curious about getting into retail, buying, planning, merchandising in the future. That's a curiosity of yours. If you haven't worked in retail at all yet, that would be a really smart part-time job to get after your first year of college, because you need to understand the business from all sides of it. So that would be a smart move. If you haven't done some kind of customer service in the past, customer service or working with people and problem solving, those are skills that transfer to so many different areas going forward in all kinds of different industries. So that's a skill set that is often part of a part-time job that's really smart. It makes a lot of sense for preparing you to be a good candidate for future internships in more of a corporate setting in the future. So I guess I just wanted to give a shout out that there's lots of part-time work you could do this summer that's really valuable and smart, and does lead to other kinds of opportunities.
Thank you. The final word I'm going to give you before we turn you back to the worksheet is that as you think about these experiences, think about what you hope to get out of them. There are 4 broad categories of reasons you might get involved in experiences next spring or summer. It could be academic. It could be related to your studies. Another category, it could be civic. It could be more about getting involved in your community. Another category would be professional development, exploring a career or building some skills. And finally, there's just personal, because you love it, because it matters to you. It's something that you yourself want to do. And of course, a project or whatever you do during the summer could be a combination of these things. But don't feel as though every experience needs to be just for one thing. It's not all about academics. It's not all about civic. It's not all about your career. Of course, you should always keep in mind that these things are, should be personally meaningful to you as well. So,
Well, and I just want to add real quick onto that, in terms of like a passion project, for example, if you just love robotics or you're super interested in social media and how you could possibly maybe you see other people doing things online that you think is fascinating. I mean, you can teach yourself or take courses online, and we'll tell you more about resources for this to learn different skill sets, to learn more about Photoshop or InDesign, or maybe I think that don't overlook your personal passions and things you might want to get involved in. Just because it's not necessarily for another person or earning a paycheck doesn't mean that it's not worth your while, because you're going to be building skills, experience, and like more understanding of yourself and how it relates to options in the world through any of these options.
absolutely. So heading back to our worksheet, the next thing for you to think about is step number 2, imagining your spring and summer experiences. And again, there's a dysfunctional belief and a reframe I'd like to share. The dysfunctional belief is that you have to find the one right thing to do. And that's just not the case. You need to come up with a lot of ideas so you can explore lots of possibilities for the future. Ultimately, you're probably going to just pick 1 or 2 things. But at this point, you're just trying to brainstorm. You're just going through what we call in my house our junk drawer, that drawer where you stuff everything because it doesn't belong anywhere else. Right now, you're just unpacking it, finding out what's all in there. What could you possibly do? So at this point, don't try to limit your imagination. Open up your imagination. And then as you explore and learn more, then you can begin to identify what one thing. But it could be that it's not the first thing that comes to mind, but the second or third, or even the fourth thing that comes to mind that ends up being the best idea. So at this point, look at your values and what brings you joy. And then much of that is kind of retrospective. So now I want you to be prospective or looking forward. Write down what kinds of things you'd like to do this spring or next summer that align with those values and things that bring you joy. At this point, be as specific or as general as you'd like. If it's general or vague now, don't worry. We're going to give you resources to explore specific options. Write down as many things as you'd like for the spring and the summer. But again, try to generate a lot of ideas. When you feel like, well, I'm done, try to come up with 1 more. And again, we'll give you about 3 minutes for this. I'm going to share this screen with the different types of experiences again, just so you can refer to it as you're brainstorming. Okay, take another minute, and then we're going to move ahead. And of course, later you can continue working on it after the workshop. Yeah, I hope you have a good running start at these ideas. The third step here I'm going to walk you through is to look at step number 3, name next steps. So now that you've identified some possible experiences for the spring and summer, I want you to choose just one and to name your next steps. Of course, continue thinking about this otherwise. And so first, write down that spring or summer experience. What do you need to do next? Who can help you learn, or where can you go to find out more? And again, we'll give you a resource worksheet. And the phrasing on the document you have is probably a little different from this. This was from something that you would handwrite. So I changed it to say, write us on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being not at all, 10 being absolutely. How much do you have the resources, the time, the money, the connections to make that spring or summer experience happen? How much do you actually like the idea? And how confident are you that you can do it? And finally, how coherent is the idea? That is, how much does it fit your values and interests? Take 2 minutes just to kind of jot down. The idea of giving you just a very short amount of time is also to try to short circuit that censor that might be in your mind that says, well, you can't do that. Just tell that part of your brain to shut up and write down as quickly as possible, because you don't want to limit what you might actually be able to do. There might be more resources out there than you realize, or it might be make a lot more sense than you think. So go ahead and write as quickly as possible. For just a couple minutes here. Oh, and I do have an example for you. So for example, if I value friendship and in high school, I really enjoyed helping friends with homework, maybe I'll look for a service club that tutors middle schoolers and mentors young students. And so then I might write for my spring activity, mentor younger students, and to learn more, I'll look at the campus Y for service clubs. I'll stop talking now.
I'm going to challenge you guys actually, because as I look at those gauges, or maybe what you have as a scale from 1 to 10 on the sheet, boy, those could be some self-limiting thoughts. And I guess what Dean Duvall and I want to teach you is, for anything that you're really interested in, I bet you we could help you find the resources. I bet that you could, by talking to resources and learning from other people, you could increase that confidence. So I think maybe this is your initial thoughts about it, but then I think it's good to maybe challenge yourself to think about how you could overcome some of those concerns about resources, for example.
Okay. Can I get thumbs up? Are people ready to move on to the next step? Or do you, yeah, just, I can't ask you an either or question here. Just thumbs up if you're ready. Okay.
I'm seeing some thumbs.
All right. Those of you still working, definitely come back to it afterwards. Just want to make sure that we have enough time to cover all of the wonderful material. April, take it from here.
All right. So networking. I wonder how some of you feel about that word. I think it can sound scary to a lot of college students. And to be quite honest with you, even though I've been a career advisor for, I don't know, more than 15 years, maybe 17 years, the word networking still can sound a little maybe intimidating. But what the reality is that it's just talking to others for insights and ideas. So when I think of networking, literally it is something like you have probably maybe when your parents, if your parents were able to come for parents and family weekend, maybe you asked around about, oh, where's a good restaurant for us to go? Or maybe when you first moved to St. Louis, you had to figure out a new place to get your hair cut and you had to ask around for that. That's also networking. So when we talk about networking, on a lot of times you're going to be starting by just talking to your aunt at Thanksgiving. Hey, Aunt Sarah, I know you work at a PR agency. I think I've kind of known that always, but I don't, what does that actually mean? So it's actually just getting back to just chatting with people, asking for ideas. Or, when you have a cousin who is meaning well and says to you at Thanksgiving or maybe over winter break, hey, what are you up to this summer? They are probably just trying to find something to talk to you about and they're not that invested in your answer, but it might strike fear in your heart that you're like, I don't know. Take advantage of that moment and say, actually, I don't know, I love your ideas, I'm kind of interested in X, but I'm not really sure where to go for it. Do you know anybody who's interned in that area before? Or I would really like to try you know, this other thing. And I'm just wondering, do you know any places I could volunteer? So I think networking is just that. And so what I want to remind you of, and maybe you can advance us to the next slide if you don't mind,
Sure.
of all of the people who are already in your network. So these are your friends here on campus. You have friends from all over the country and the world. And the reality is they all have friends that you don't already know. So sometimes it's a matter of saying, hey, do you know anyone who? And I'll tell you, one time I was sitting with students in kind of a group meeting, and two friends came in together. And while we were in the meeting, one was talking about how she's interested in a certain thing, and the other girl said, oh, my aunt does that. And they had just never had that conversation before. So I think it's a matter of just asking around. So you have friends here on campus, you have friends from back home, you have family members, you have neighbors, your parents' neighbors, people on campus. So these could be instructors, it could be staff people, and just acquaintances that maybe from church or synagogue or doctors or whatnot. So these are all people who are already in your network. So I really relate if you're somebody who says, yeah, but I'm really interested in something that my parents know nothing about. I was definitely in that situation as a student. My parents there were not going to be any natural connections that were going to happen for me. On the other hand, I did have a network, and that's something I could build. So you could start building your network with WashU alumni, with people around you. So I just want to encourage you along those lines. It doesn't have to be a scary thing. You just start with the people right around you. I want to point out a couple of resources, and we will send these in a follow-up document that we're going to send to you. We will have hyperlinks to all of these, but through the Career Center, we have a networking and informational interviewing handout that kind of teaches you, like, what do you actually say if you reach out to somebody by email or through LinkedIn or in any other kind of circumstance where you might end up reaching out to someone. What do you say? How do you set it up? How do you prepare for it? How do you follow up? We have information on all of those steps. We also have a link in the handout that we'll send to you that's how to write a really effective email. So how do you include enough detail about who you are and how you got their name without, giving them a life story? We also have something called success stories. So this is a database of other WashU students. This is available on the WashU Career Center website. So if you go to students.wustl.edu and type in success stories into the search box there, you'll see that it'll bring up a database of students who have interned different places. So there's different search criteria. You can put in a major, you could put in a location, like a state, and you can see what kinds of things come up for other things that students have done, and it gives you their contact information. So if you had also been eyeing the MS Society to do an internship or something, and you see that a fellow student or a recent grad had interned at the MS Society, you might reach out to that person and say, hey, I see that you did this and I'm really curious about it. And I've been looking at the website and I'm just wondering, what do you think are the qualities they're really looking for? Because I'm thinking about putting together a resume or a cover letter or reaching out to someone, and I'd love to hear from your experience. So success stories is kind of like a in-house student-to-student version of what you may have heard about with LinkedIn. And that's the next one here. So LinkedIn is a fantastic resource. And as a career center, we refer students to LinkedIn all the time because there are really great search criteria that you can look at on LinkedIn. So if you are interested in writing, if you were to put writing into the search box or editor or something like that, you could then narrow down the results to other WashU alumni or other people who have written for Stud Life who have that as part of their profile on LinkedIn. So if you need help with how to kind of get a LinkedIn profile started, this is a great time for that. And if you need help for it, you can stop by the Career Center and walk in. We have walk-in hours every weekday from 10 until 5 p.m. And one of the students who works in our front office would be happy to walk you through that. Similarly, there's a new resource that has really just launched within the last 6 months or so. It's called WashU Connects. So it's WashU CNX if you were going to put it in the search bar. This is a mentoring kind of a thing that is for WashU students and alumni. It's a great thing to check out. It's similar to LinkedIn in some ways. So you can spend some time kind of clicking around there. Let's say if you have some time over winter break. I know that for me, when I was in college, the first couple of weeks of winter break, I was going to be binging TV. I was going to be hanging out with my friends. I needed a break. But then maybe after the new year, I kind of was like, all right, well, what am I going to do now? I still have a couple weeks left. And that's when maybe clicking around on LinkedIn or clicking around on WashU Connects is a great idea. Finally, I want to mention through the Career Center, we have career interest groups. Now, these are groups that are organized around different interests that you might have related to careers. So I mentioned earlier that I manage a group for students who are interested in strategic communications kinds of roles. That's more of a functional group. It's kind of saying like, I am interested in communication. I know communication can happen. How to spell WashU Connects. It's just the way it is on the screen there. It's WashU CNX. That was a question in the chat I was responding to. But for the career interest groups, I manage strategic communications. Like I mentioned, that's kind of a functional area that could go across a lot of different industries. There are other career interest groups that are more based on industry. So there's one for kids who are interested in consulting, one for finance. There's a group for students who are interested in government and public policy. There's a group for people who are interested in entertainment. So there is not a group for everything. We can work with you at the Career Center, whether or not one of these groups appeal to you. But these are sort of some like areas of critical mass where there's some programming around it. There's newsletters that go out. There's opportunities to connect with alumni who work in these areas. So I just want to point out that, oh my gosh, I just gave you 4, 5, 6 kinds of resources for networking. So if you kind of were feeling like, gee, I have an idea of something I want to do, but I don't feel like I know how to get into it, there's a lot of people you could start asking for advice.
Thank you. I want to add a couple things about university folks that you can talk to as well. One are your professors, especially if you're interested in research or doing independent study or anything like that in the future. Professors can seem pretty intimidating to talk to. And there can be the misimpression that you need to have something absolutely brilliant to say to a professor before you can really talk to them. Actually, most professors really, really like good questions, much more than they do that you would already have answers. And so if there's a professor whose research you're interested in, or whose subject matter you're interested in, go in and meet with them in office hours, reach out to them by email, try to set up a Zoom talk or something, and just ask them some very simple questions. Share what you're interested in and say, if I wanted to pursue this more, how might I do this? Is there research that you might be able to point me to? And then, of course, you can always ask about them. Everybody loves to talk about themselves, including professors. So you can ask, how did you get involved in it? How did you get interested in it? And these kinds of conversations, these good questions, can lead to really, really great connections and conversations. And that's what networking is really all about, is just asking for directions and having a conversation. And also just for student activities and clubs and things, talk to your WUSAs and RAs and other people like that at the university, people who have been down the road just a little further than you, just to ask about different possibilities.
When it comes down to it, really networking is about having a conversation about a shared interest. And so I think it's very seldom that people are not interested in doing that. So if you do take a chance and reach out to someone that you don't know very well by email and they don't respond, or you try to send a LinkedIn connection and they don't respond, I can almost absolutely guarantee you it's not because of you. It's just because that person received 100 other emails that day. Sometimes I feel like I receive like just emails coming in like a fire hose for me at work. And sometimes something gets lost. So I don't think it's a bad idea to reach out, or if you want to come talk to a career advisor about how to do that, you can. But it's really, I think most people are very happy to do this. I want to give you one little framework to think about it before we go on to talking about other search resources. And it's this: if somebody who went to your high school that you didn't, they go there now, you're here at WashU, and you didn't really know them. Let's say they're a little younger than you, or you have a big high school and you didn't know them personally, but they reach out and say, hey, I'm kind of considering WashU, but I don't know anyone who goes there. Would you be willing to talk to me about it? I have a feeling most of you would be happy to do that because you do go to WashU and you do know, you understand, you have something in common with them about their high school. So you both know what that shared experience of your high school is like. So being able to kind of chat with them about what the transition was like to come to WashU, or to come from wherever your hometown is to St. Louis, that's something you're probably pretty comfortable talking about. And that's networking. So it's just on a different level. So you can imagine how that wouldn't be, you wouldn't hate that. You wouldn't be mad at somebody for reaching out to you about that. And it's the same thing when you're on the asking side of things. Okay, so let's talk about, besides networking, what are some other places that you could find things, some other ways to search. All right, so when it comes to things like student activities, hopefully most of you know about WooGo. If you don't, Google it, check it out. It's going to tell you about what's happening on campus. So if you feel like you haven't yet made the kinds of connections on campus or met the kinds of friends that you're interested in, I would really challenge you as you wrap up this semester and kind of go into the new semester to think about what were you hoping your college experience would feel like? What kinds of connections were you hoping to make, or things you wanted to try? And really kind of challenge yourself to go beyond your, I don't know, something you already know, and try something new. So WooGo is a great way to do that. In terms of internships, we have a career center database called CareerLink, and it is where, we have a whole team on our staff, and their job is to connect with employers. So all of the internships and jobs that we learn about go into this CareerLink database. So go to our website and check it out. If you need help navigating CareerLink, again, you can drop by every weekday. We have drop-in hours, and you can come by and have somebody walk you through it. I will say CareerLink does feel less intuitive. We're so used to Apple and Google products that CareerLink does take a couple of tips and tricks to make it feel really comfortable. So click around on it yourself, and if you need help, there's no shame in that. Idealist, I want to point this one out because if you look at idealist.org, and again, don't super stress out about writing all of this down right now, because we will send you a follow-up with all of these links. But Idealist is a place where a lot of nonprofit organizations post opportunities. So not just internships, but volunteer opportunities, also jobs. What I really love about Idealist is that I've noticed that the more corporate an organization, or the larger or more kind of corporate in nature an organization, the more likely it is that they, when they're looking for interns, are going to say, we are looking for juniors, or students after their junior year, or, or seniors about to graduate. And that can feel, as a first year student or after your sophomore year, like, hey, how am I supposed to find internship opportunities? Well, I think that there's tons of internship opportunities that are available to first year students and sophomore students at smaller organizations or at nonprofit organizations. And when I say nonprofit really runs the gamut from a really small organization all the way up to the United Way, or WashU is a nonprofit organization. So there's just a real variety there. And Idealist will show you how you can search by function. So if you are a writer, for example, or if you are somebody who's interested in grant writing, or if you're interested in finance, you can search by function in Idealist to look for an opportunity that will allow you to do those kinds of roles within a variety of organizations. In terms of service, at WashU, the Gephardt Institute and the Campus Y are both fantastic places where you could look for ways to get involved with service. There are so many different opportunities available in the St. Louis area, and specifically within WashU related groups of students. But for those of you who are thinking, I might want to do some service work over the summer, Volunteer Match, Catch a Fire, and again, Idealist are great ways to look for things that might be in your home area, either to do remotely or in person. And again, with each of these, you can search by function. So if you know there's a certain skill set that you're hoping to really cultivate, that feels a little more related to professional skills than maybe something you've done in the past, you could definitely search that way. And those are all wonderful things to add to your resume. So employers don't really care if the things on your resume were things you got paid for or not. So those are all great ways to add experiences to your resume. In terms of research, the Office of Undergraduate Research at WashU is a fantastic resource. You could go in and meet with advisors there. As Dean Duvall mentioned, you can talk to professors and friends. So there's resources along those lines. Let's see, I see a question in the chat. Are there some things that are more valuable than others? I don't think so. I think it comes back to what we were talking about. What is meaningful to you? What are you interested in that brings you a sense of accomplishment or joy, or feeling like you're contributing to the world in a way, or that really matches with your values and how you want to use time in your life? I really believe that from any of the things that you try, you will learn more about yourself. You will gain skills that are valuable, either in a really direct way or in a way that will transfer. So transferable skills, I mentioned an example earlier of customer service. If you maybe you did customer service in retail or at a restaurant, I'll tell you what, my first job was doing public relations. This is kind of going to sound a little wild, but my first job was driving the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile across the country for a year after I graduated from college. And this was a public relations job. So I was on the road for a year representing the Oscar Mayer brand, showing up at fairs and festivals and, all kinds of different places, trying to get media coverage for the work we were doing. And when I got interviewed for that job, the person who hired me loved to hear that I had worked in restaurants, because what that meant to him was that I had ability to problem solve and to think on my feet and to be able to respond to situations that maybe I hadn't encountered before. I had an ability to help people when things are busy. So I think that was so appealing to him to see on my resume. And he specifically said that he looks for people who have had that kind of customer service experience. So that just goes to show you that the skills that you gain can transfer to other kinds of situations. Okay, so then the last thing I wanted to mention is LinkedIn Learning is such an awesome resource. I don't know if you guys have looked at this yet or not, but if you haven't, I recommend that you just Google Woostel LinkedIn Learning, and you'll see that WashU has paid for all of you to have free access. So this is something that, you know, your average person would need to pay for, but by virtue of being a student at WashU, you have access to LinkedIn Learning, and you can watch videos or tutorials on absolutely anything. So I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to learn more about, like it could be specific technical skills, like let's say you wanted to really become excellent at Excel, you could take courses on that. You could learn InDesign. You can learn about search optimization. You could learn, it could even be soft skills or interesting kinds of talks that you can watch. But LinkedIn Learning is a wonderful resource. And so that's something that you could do over the summer. Let's say you wanted to learn something like how to better be a presenter. You could watch some videos and practice some things on LinkedIn Learning. And then those are skills that you could add to your resume.
I could add just a couple things also. If you are interested in service during the summer, the Gephardt Institute does have some unique fellowships that will help you pay for, you know, I think it's like between $3,000 and $5,000 doing community service within Washington, within St. Louis. And so you can definitely look at the Gephardt Institute for any of those kinds of fellowships. If you're interested in study abroad, the deadlines will be coming up in the next month or two. If you wanted to study abroad after your first year, so you would want to look into that sooner than later. It's not
And
a
that's
super
just for
common
the
thing.
summer of your first year, summer after. So like if you, so you don't
Yeah.
have to submit something now if you wanted to study abroad in like junior year, for example.
No,
But
we're
if
just
you wanted
talking
to do
about
something this summer, yeah.
Yeah, so just the summer after your first year. If you wanted to look at that, then there's information at the resource page that we're going to hand out as well. Let's see, a question. How do you know when you are good enough to list something on your resume? Language, technical skills, etc. April, I'm going to kick that one to you.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of saying what your level of proficiency is. So if you speak Spanish, for example, you can put in a skills section that you are proficient in Spanish, or you can put beginner Spanish, or you can put fluency in Spanish. So I think for any of these kinds of skills that you might be gaining, you could say, you could even put that you've just taken some summer courses in something, just to show that you've exposed yourself to the skill set without making any promises that you're an expert. So I think it's just a matter of sort of listing your level of proficiency or your comfort level with something. And that's something you can always bring to the Career Center to get feedback on.
Yeah, in fact, I think we're going to talk about that in just a moment here. Building your resume.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe for some of you, you have written a resume that you use to apply to WashU, or maybe you haven't. And either way, it's okay. We have a handout that really walks you through every part of formatting a resume, how to have enough white space, how to have parallel structure in the way that you list things, the different kinds of headings that you can have, and how to do that effectively. But what I'm going to spend just a minute talking about here, rather than all of those things, because they're all in the handout and you can read through the handout and see a bunch of samples, is writing effective descriptions. So, oh, there is a question about, will this slideshow be posted? Yeah, we'll have the whole video available. And so if you wanted to either walk through it or watch it again, you can. So for the effective descriptions, sometimes this is how you describe what you did. And so when I look at resumes and I see a really vague description, it doesn't really tell me very much about the transferable skills that you have available to offer to the employer you're trying to work at or wherever you're trying to go. So I want to give a couple of tips and then show you an example. So an effective description is always going to start with an action verb. So you don't want to say, I did this, that, and the other. Instead of a full sentence, you'll start with an action verb like planned, coordinated, managed, created, collaborated, those kinds of things. Then you also want to be really clear about what you actually did. I can't tell you how often I will be reviewing somebody's resume and they have this really fancy sounding description. And I'm like, I have no idea what this means. Like yes, it sounds fancy, but it's telling me nothing about you. So then I'll say to them, okay, just tell me, like, it's just you and me sitting here. Just tell me what you actually did when you were there. And they'll say, well, I worked with this group and I put together this information that was put into a database. And so I say, okay, I want you to write that because that is what's going to help somebody understand what you did. And along those lines, you want to give numbers and details when you can to paint a picture. So if you worked with 10 people, say worked with on a team of 10, or if you raised money for something, say how much money you raised. I think that kind of thing really helps people to understand. And then finally, ideally, you want to work towards a place where your description talks about your results and the accomplishments that you were able to make come to fruition as part of your efforts versus your responsibilities. So you don't want it to sound like a job description that anybody could read about what you were supposed to have done. Instead, you want it to sound like what you actually did. So if you want to take us to the next slide, we can give an example here. Okay, so one time, here's another point I want to make. As a first year student, a lot of your examples on your resume are going to be from high school, and that is okay at this point. You may have some things from college that you want to add, and that's fantastic. After this summer and after the next couple of years, ideally, you're going to move away from some of the high school things on your resume. So by the time you're a junior or a senior, you might not have a lot left from high school, but right now that's perfectly fine. So this is something that I halfway stole from a student of mine and halfway made up myself. So if you actually know this organization and I'm not representing it correctly, I apologize for that. But for the sake of just describing, if I saw on somebody's resume that someone was the treasurer for an organization called Athletes Helping Athletes. By the way, I like the way this person wrote it out and then they put an abbreviation. So if you just put AHA, nobody else is probably going to know what that means. As familiar as you are with it, or maybe it's really common in your town or everybody at your high school knows what that means. When you take it to a different context, people probably won't know. So you always want to spell things out. But this person put responsible for helping promote character values. Okay, first of all, responsible for is pretty vague, right? And I don't know what this person actually did. How did you promote character values? Who did you promote them to? Through what channels did you do this? Were you successful? What this says doesn't tell me a lot. So let's look at how we could improve this. So you'll see here as the treasurer before with the previous description, I had no idea what this person did as treasurer. So this first bullet says what they did in their role as treasurer. And it also says, it kind of gives a little hint as to what the organization is all about as part of the bullet. You'll see in the second bullet point, it talks about, this person spoke to groups ranging in size from 10 to 100 students at local elementary and middle schools. So that gives me a much better sense of what this group actually does. They speak to others. And then finally, this person was selected by their peers to represent the organization by speaking at their school district board meeting about the importance of funding for their mission. So all of that tells me so much more about this student and what they have to offer someone in the future. So if I were an employer or a volunteer manager or a student group leader that was trying to choose new leadership or something, I see, oh my gosh, this person has speaking ability. This person managed the budget for this organization, and they were able to advocate on behalf of this organization. And those are all three skill sets that I would really find valuable. So when you work on your resume, and I really want to emphasize, you may or may not need a resume for something that you do this summer. However, I highly recommend that you go ahead and make this a goal for your spring semester. And here's why. Let's say you decide you're interested in becoming a WUSA, or you want to become an RA someday, or you meet your mom's friend and they say, oh, sure, I'm happy to chat with you. Why don't you send me your resume? In that moment, I do not want fear to go lightning streaking through your heart because you're like, oh, crud, I don't have a resume. Then you don't follow up, right? Because you're like, I don't have anything to send. And you get paralyzed with fear about the fact that you don't have something ready to go. So what I would really love is for you to have a resume ready. Now, this is something that is going to continue to grow and change throughout your entire life, to be honest with you. but I want you to have a version that you're proud of now. So you don't have to just do this on your own. You can work on something. We're going to send you the link to the resume handout on the Career Center website, but you could bring it in and have somebody review it. So it says there, we have quick questions hours every weekday. We also have live chat available on the computer. So through our website on weekday afternoons. So these are all things that you can have someone take a look. You don't have to do this on your own.
And the final thought I'll leave you with about your resume is this is one of the places where you can begin to draw meaning out of your experience. If you bring your mind back to the beginning of the program, we were saying that what makes it meaningful is you. And the resume is not just recording what you've done, but it's an opportunity to do some creative thought around what it is that you've gained out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've come to the top of the hour. Please take a moment and write down your next steps. Again, April is going to send out that resource document for you to refer to.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, this is an exciting adventure with a lot of possibility. If you have nervousness, anxiety, we're not going to tell you to not feel that, but instead, rather think about channeling that kind of energy and turn it into what's possible, what could happen. And I like to tell students, you've gone from being dependent on families to independent, but you're not done yet. Interdependence is the next step, and that is working with others to think about next steps. So work with us, work with the people on the resources. April, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so my final thought is it is noon. If you need to go, you're welcome to. But if anybody has questions, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes. I'm happy to answer them either in the chat or even better, I'd love to see your face and have you ask it or turn on your microphone, whatever. But I do want you all to think about a next step. So what we just told you is a lot of stuff you could do. It's too much. You can't do all of that. We don't want you to do all of these things. We want you to think about what's one thing, what's one right next step for you, and kind of write it down and consider a timeline of when am I going to do this by? So maybe it's, I'm going to work on my resume and I'm going to work on it over winter break and I'm going to bring it in January and have somebody look at it. Or, hey, I've been thinking about getting involved in community service. I'm going to look at those links that they gave us. I would really love it if you pick out one thing, because sometimes I think if you don't pick out one thing, it just feels like, oh, here's this thing, this whole pile of things I should be doing, and you don't end up moving forward with them. So, so yeah, pick out one thing. And for anybody who has questions, please feel free to ask us. And you can ask us now. We're here. I'll try to add my document to the chat here, and otherwise I will definitely be sending it to you by email.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I myself, I need to run to another session.
There we go. I added our handout, and I am here for a minute. I can hang out for a moment. So
I will leave my email in case anything I said sparks something that you want to follow up on. Otherwise, I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving break. You're very welcome.
And if you're curious about where you can find this recording or other things that the Career Center puts out, we do have a YouTube channel. So I will send you all the link to the YouTube channel.
Awesome.
Okay. Everybody have a fantastic weekend.
All right.
Matt, if you want to, you can stop recording if you need to leave, but I'll stay here and answer any questions that pop up.
You got it.